Now this evening is really special. Here at the Center for Spiritual Living, we teach something about prosperity, abundance, wealth, all those words. We teach that once you have that handle, really your life kind of falls into place. But here's the question. What on earth does that mean? Prosperity, abundance, and wealth. People often think money. Oh, you haven't seen my bank account, so you can't call me wealthy. But I think we're going to learn a different way of understanding true wealth, true prosperity, and true abundance tonight with this master teacher of Kriya Yoga, Yogacharya. Ellen Grace O'Brian is here, and she is visiting us from San Jose and bringing us this wonderful book, The Jewel of Abundance. So I'm very excited to welcome her. Will you help me? Ellen Grace.
Thanks so much. Good evening, everyone. I'm really happy to be here, happy to be with you. And Jennifer, thank you so much for that warm introduction and that just planting the seed that we'll take a look tonight at really what it means to be wealthy. And ask the question, is it possible to truly prosper without losing your soul along the way? And I want to tell you that question came from when you have a book published, your publisher wants you to have what they call your elevator speech for your book. In a nutshell, what would you say this book is about? And so that's what I said. This book is about how to thrive and to prosper without losing your soul along the way. So this evening I'll be sharing with you about that and what yoga has to say about it, the ancient Vedic teachings, and significantly I think why it matters that we learn what true prosperity is and how to actualize it in our lives today. First, I want to share with you that the book is dedicated to my beloved spiritual teacher, Roy Eugene Davis. So when you open the book, it says, dedicated to Roy Eugene Davis, who taught me the real nature of abundance. And it's especially poignant this evening because my beloved teacher just made his transition. He just passed from his body 2 days ago. And so this is my first time, of course, to be with people after that occurring. And so I want to tell you how open-hearted and tender I feel, and how grateful I am to be here with you, because he spent his life more than 6 decades. He was 88 when he passed from his body, but he had more than 6 decades of teaching these principles all over the world. And I believe there's nothing more that he would have wanted from me in his honor than to be here with you tonight. So I'm especially grateful for this opportunity. So I'd like to begin with just a couple of minutes of centering meditation, and then I'm going to talk to you about some themes from the book, and I want to keep some time aside for your questions, because I find you're usually really good at letting me know what I forgot to say. So I'm going to open up for that, and I look forward to that exchange, to that dialogue with you. But let's begin with a few minutes of centering. And simply sitting straight but relaxed. If you're comfortable doing so, close your eyes. And we begin with an intention to open our hearts and our minds to the infinite. And to acknowledge God, however you think of God, however God is real to you. Let us honor that one truth, that reality that is called by many names. That in which we live and move and have our being, that which surrounds us and indwells us, that which is the life of our life, the breath of our breath. So if you're new to meditation, then simply become aware of your breathing. Notice the feeling of your breath in your nostrils. The coolness of the air coming in, the warmth of the air moving out. And with your in-breath, feel and intend that you're simply diving within into the infinite ocean of divine consciousness that is within you. You're breathing out to simply let go of any stress or tension from your day so that you are here now, completely present. May we be inspired this evening to thrive and to prosper, to express our innate divinity, to contribute to the well-being of all life on this beautiful planet that we live on. May peace and blessings shine through our heart and our mind into the world. Om, peace, peace, peace. And then as you feel ready, simply open your eyes and bring your attention and awareness back to this room, back to being present with one another. Thank you for that moment. I like to think of it as a moment of arriving. You know, on Sundays at our center, we always have a centering moment like that, and I say, okay, we got our bodies here. Now, let's get our minds here. And let's connect with our spiritual nature. So that question, is it possible to truly prosper without losing our soul along the way? Well, of course, we can't really lose the soul because we are the soul. That is our true nature. We are spiritual beings. We cannot lose ourselves. However, we can lose touch with ourselves. And especially in the very fast-paced life that we have today, with its multitude of distractions, it is possible to lose touch with the soul, to lose touch with ourselves. So In order to experience our own abundant nature, we need to, one, know the truth of what we are, and how to experience that and realize that for ourselves. And of course, that is the first lesson that I learned from my spiritual teacher. You know, I had heard about this kingdom of God that is within you, that is within us all. And I had heard it from the West in that way, I'd heard it from the East, that thou art. But I didn't know how to actually experience that for myself. So when I tried meditating, when I tried looking within, as far as I could tell, there really wasn't much there, except sometimes some indigestion and a lot of thought. So one of the things that we need, of course, is to discover how to look within and how to experience that truth of our being, which is the very source of our true abundance. So there's a story that I tell in the book that is an ancient teaching story that comes from the Sufis. And it's one you may have heard, but it bears retelling. So in this story, this wise fool that the Sufis call Mullah Nasruddin. Mullah is out at night, one night, and he's searching around frantically on the ground. There's this street light above him. He's looking all around, digging, scratching his head, digging some more, looking around some more. And his friend comes up to him and says, Mullah, what are you doing? You know, out here so late at night, and you're scratching around on the ground. What are you up to? And Mullah says, well, I've lost my keys. And so his friend says to him, if you'll notice what our friend, whoever it is, always says to us, which is, well, where did you leave them? That is the weirdest thing, because if we knew, obviously we wouldn't be looking for them. But that friend always comes and says, where did you last have them? Where did you last see them? And Mullah says to his friend, well, in my house. So his friend says, well, Mullah, if you last saw them in your house, why are you out here looking under this street lamp? And he says, because the light is better out here. So no matter how many times I tell that story or how many times I've heard it, it still cracks me up. And of course, it's a story about us. It's a story about how we look for abundance. It's a story about how we look for truth. It's a story about how we look for happiness. We look out there in the world, in circumstances and in things, because we think the light is better out there, that it's easier to find out there. We don't know how to look in our own house, which of course is our own consciousness. The key is in our own consciousness, in our own house. And so the first spiritual principle that we learn about abundance and the jewel of abundance is, of course, that the jewel of abundance is our own consciousness. And through our spiritual practice, we learn how to not just know about it, but to realize it, to experience it for ourselves. Because otherwise, we're looking all the time out in the world for what will make us happy, for what will give us a sense of wealth and abundance, when all the while, that which is the true source of our abundance is within us. So first, in order not to lose our soul as we seek to prosper and thrive, we need to have regular contact with the truth of our being. And that The best tool I know for that is meditation and prayer, turning our attention within and learning to let the mind become quiet so that we can experience our own fullness, our own wholeness. So I think it's not so much that we lose our soul, we get caught up in distraction, we get caught up in looking outside of ourselves, and we lose our balance. We leave the soul out. We leave the soul out of our plans in life. And we don't have a practice of coming back again and again to the soul, which is what our daily spiritual practice gives us. So I think of this map of abundant living, of spiritual abundance, as first, we need to know where we are, who we are, what we are, and then we need to know what the map itself is and how we're going to discover this thriving for ourselves. So we want to realize what we are as spiritual beings, and then we want to actualize it. So first we need that way of discovering who we are and where we are, and then how we make this spiritual journey of thriving. Now I'd like to share the story about my own life and this spiritual lesson that I learned really as a child, as a little girl, about how to experience balance in my life and really abundance. I didn't realize this as a spiritual lesson until much later. You know, sometimes you look back and you think, that was a spiritual lesson. So I'm going to share that with you. When I was a little girl, maybe about 7 years old, my family had moved from the inner city of Oakland. And you're close enough here to know about Oakland. So my family was working class family, and it was part of that working class migration from the inner city out to the suburbs. And so my family was able to buy their first home in Hayward. And I understand today that that was a great privilege, that we were able to have our own home and that my parents could afford that. But I also have to say that there was a lot of cultural deprivation in moving from the city to the suburbs, where there was nothing but tract houses and neighborhoods that looked alike and people that looked alike. And but I want to say the saving grace of culture that we had out there in the suburbs was a strip mall. And the mall was the Mecca. The mall was the place of refuge, it was the place of entertainment, and it was the place of education. And for me, it was the saving grace, because right there in the strip mall was Miss Margie's dance studio. And today, I can still see Miss Margie in my mind's eye, because she was something. She had flaming red hair that was curly. She had black glasses with rhinestones on them that tipped up at the corners. She wore a purple leotard with a belt and fishnet stockings and high-heeled tap shoes. Now, for a girl who was 7 years old, that was obviously a goddess. So what Miss Margie taught us was how to turn without losing your balance. So step number 1, connect to yourself. Step number 1, connect to yourself. You know, anytime you would go off to do your dance without first taking a moment to connect with your own body, that would be a little disaster would follow. But then her second law of Miss Margie's How to Turn Without Losing Your Balance, which is a universal law in dance, I'm sure, is that you had to have a focus. So you would pick a point of focus in the room, something that was steady, and every time you turn, you come back to that focus. You turn and you touch your focus. You turn and you focus, and you turn and you focus. And I discovered that sure enough, anytime I tried to turn and I let my mind be someplace else and completely forgot about my focus, I would fall over. But those two principles, first, connect with yourself, and second, have a focus, turn out to be a spiritual lesson that has a lot to do with abundance in our lives. So, first, connect to yourself, as I mentioned, because in truth you are the jewel of abundance. It is to be found in our own consciousness. And then, have a focus for how it is you're going to live your abundant life. And what I'm sharing with you in this book is the ancient focus that we find from the Vedas, scriptures that are thousands of years old, about how to live a healthy, happy, thriving, spiritually fulfilled life. Do you want to hear about that? Okay, good. It's like, well, yeah, here we are. So what they offered are 4 universal aims for life. For, as I said, a happy, healthy, thriving, spiritually awake life. 4 universal aims to have as your point of focus so you do not lose touch with your soul along the way when you're on your journey of thriving and fulfilling your potential. So I'm going to share those 4 goals with you. The first goal is to live with higher purpose. And the Sanskrit word for that is dharma. And that word is becoming much more familiar today. It's entered the English lexicon, just like yoga has. But just like yoga, there's confusion about what dharma really is. So people think yoga is exercise, and they don't understand that yoga is an ancient system of philosophy from India, and that actually what we think of as yoga, the exercise, is this very small part of it that's meant to quiet your mind so that you can meditate. It's meant to bring harmony to the energy in your body so that you can get clear about the truth of your being. So we have confusion about that. Same thing now about dharma. So we hear people talk about dharma, and they say, oh, that's my dharma, or he's working there because that's his dharma. But dharma is not our job. It's not our vocation. Dharma is living our authentic life. It's expressing our divine capacities and being in a situation in life which allows those divine capacities to blossom and bear fruit. So dharma, the word itself means a thing being what it is. So, for example, we could say the dharma of a door is to open and close. The dharma of an ocean is to break into waves. So what is the dharma of a human being? Dharma of a human being is to wake up, is to know the truth of what we are, and then the other side of that coin is to live that truth. And that's where our path of abundance comes in, is living that truth of our being. So that first universal aim, and by the way, though these goals we draw from scriptures that are literally thousands of years old, they are meant to be for all people at all times, in all places, in all countries, from all backgrounds, from different religions, ethnicities. They're universal. They have to do with our life as human beings. So the word that describes these, the name for these four goals in Sanskrit is the Purusharthas. That word itself means for the sake of the soul. It's so beautiful. So just as I was beginning with the question, how do we do this? How do we thrive? How do we prosper? How do we live our full life? How do we live our best life without losing our soul along the way? Then we have this ancient map that is called the Purusharthas, which means for the sake of the soul. Okay, this is how you do it for the sake of your soul. Number one goal, live with higher purpose, which means wake up to the truth of what you are, and then actualize your potential. Express your divine qualities in all that you do. And there's a subset of Dharma, which I talk about in the book, which is called Swadharma, which means that which you are uniquely here to do. Each of us has talents and abilities, dreams, visions, and responsibilities and duties that are unique to us. So that is called your Swadharma. It's like a subset of Dharma itself. So that means that you will perhaps be drawn to some form of work, service in the world that will allow you to express those innate divine qualities. That would be your Swadharma. But again, your Dharma or your Swadharma is not your job. I mean, think of it today, the way that jobs are changing so much for people. If your Dharma is your job, you're going to have a problem because we're told now, especially for young people, they should just plan to change jobs, change careers even several times throughout their life. So we don't want to mistake Dharma with a job. Your Dharma is to be in your fullness, authentically that which you are. Okay, second universal aim is Artha. That is the subject of this book, The Jewel of Abundance. Artha, translated, means wealth. And of course, we understand that wealth is much more comprehensive than simply money, right? But I want to say that this universal goal that we find in the Vedas does not exclude money. It includes it. Because that's important. And it's important that wealth as a goal comes right next to Dharma. And there's a reason for that. Because we're here to wake up and we're here to make a contribution. And in order to do what we're here to do, we need to know how to attract the resources that we need in order to accomplish those purposes. So wealth is considered absolutely essential in order to serve and support Dharma. Now, the problem that we have with wealth as money or wealth as material resources is that it gets out of balance and people put it first. And it has no connection to Dharma or to living with higher purpose, with ethical purpose. And we see plenty of examples of that in our world today, don't we? And it's just disheartening, which is another big reason why I wrote this book, because I really want people to see that true wealth has to be in harmony with Dharma. It's not in and of itself, it's not for its own purpose, and it's much more comprehensive. So our wealth is our resources, our material resources. Our wealth is our health. Our wealth is our relationships. Our wealth is our family life. Our wealth is our creative energy. All of that is included in this term, Artha, that means wealth. But principally understand that wealth is to serve your purpose. Then we have the third goal, which is pleasure. Usually I get an amen at that point. I know sometimes people are so shocked they just don't say anything. This is a spiritual program, and you know, we start out with a higher purpose, then we go to wealth, and now we're at pleasure. What the heck? Remember again that these 4 universal goals, Purushartha, for the sake of the soul. So, according to the teachings of yoga, the very nature of the soul is bliss. It is ananda, or joy. And so, if we're living our purpose, we're fulfilling that divine potential, we're able to attract resources, but somehow we don't enjoy our life, we have lost touch with our soul. And when the mythologist Joseph Campbell said, "Follow your bliss," that's what he was talking about. He was talking about being able to be in touch with the soul so you could be in touch with that divine joy which is inherently within you, and learning not to lose touch with that. And then he said something that I found perhaps even more interesting. Besides saying, "Follow your bliss," he said, "You must return with the bliss and integrate it." So how many of us have heard that one? Because that is the spiritual path that we're walking, and how to not lose our soul along the way. So we're following our bliss, but we're returning to the world with it. So checking into ourselves, then we're returning to the world with our bliss, with our joy, and we're sharing it. We're sharing it, we're living it, and we're staying in tune with that divine joy within us. Okay, so what do we have so far? We have dharma, we have higher purpose, we have artha, which is wealth, we have kama, which is pleasure, and the 4th universal aim is moksha, or enlightenment. Now, here, I always like to remind everyone that these goals, once again, are universal. These were not Gautama Buddha's private goals. You know, not just for a sage. This is a goal for everyone. As my guru's guru, my teacher's teacher, Paramahansa Yogananda would say, the same God that is within me, that was within him, a great soul, great sage, is within you. The same divine potential, literally the same divine self, same spirit, is in everyone. And that same potential for enlightenment is in every person. The greatest obstacle that we have to enlightenment is our idea that it is not for us, that somehow it is unattainable, that somehow it is for someone else. So we don't tend to arrange conditions in our life because we just kind of check that part off of our list and think it's for someone else. But these 4 universal aims say, no, guess what, my friend? Enlightenment is for you. And if you want to keep your balance in this world, as you turn, keep enlightenment in your sights and know that it is part of your spiritual program to have that goal for yourself. So those are the 4 universal aims of life. And so I want to, before I open it up for questions, which I'm going to do in just a moment here, I want to tell you why it matters. Why prospering matters for us, for all of us. We are born to thrive, every single one of us. It's I call it the prosperity imperative. We are born to fulfill our potential, and we always are having nudges of the Spirit that are calling us, what I say to be the growing edge of love in our world. So each one of us has that potential, each one of us has that place, each one of us has a gift to bring forth to be the growing edge of love in our world. So true prosperity is never simply personal. It's really about an offering that we make to life itself that allows us to prosper more fully. And prosperity then becomes our path of transformation. You know, the saying that it's easy to be a saint on a mountaintop. So in that sense, when you're in the world, you're thriving and you're offering that which you are in the service of the well-being of others, you are impelled to grow and to work through your edges that get polished along the way. And in the book, I have a section in there called The Willingness Diagnostic. And that talks about how, I think for most of us, when we really look very deeply into it, we discover that it's going to take our full willingness to thrive. It's going to take our full cooperation, and it's going to ask us to change, right? It's going to change us and transform us along the way. So there's a process where we have to ask ourselves, am I willing? Am I willing to be fully awake, aware, and offering the gifts that I am here to offer? So there's the willingness diagnostic that is for all of us. And I believe also that we are at a time where we're living in a world that wants us all to be part of that growing edge of love. So I'm going to read a little bit from the book. This is from the chapter called Imagine Enlightenment. We live in an awakening world, in a time of individual and global awakening to the great truth that life is one. That's a capital O. Life is one. And that one life is God, or whatever name you want to call it. Absolute reality, spirit. I'm convinced it doesn't care. As life is God in expression, it is whole, complete, abundant, and lacks nothing. Awakening to this wholeness brings the experience of radical prosperity or sufficiency, and with that, a new way of living. There is enough for all in God's economy. It's time for us to shed the idea that one person's good is another's loss, and to rise to the truth that all can and must prosper. It's time to free ourselves and our world, our children and our grandchildren from the specter of scarcity. Many times, students have asked me, if there's no lack in God, why do we see it in our world? We see it because we have collectively believed in it, and I would add, allowed it. We have structured our lives and our world by that belief. The lack that we perceive in our world is not a problem with the source. It's a spiritual development problem. Humanity is right now like a toddler with a power tool or a computer. The power is there, the potential is there, but we don't yet fully understand it and know how to put it to good use. We are awakening to our potential to create a prospering world that works for everyone. Evolving from an egocentric model of life to a spiritually based one. As long as we remain in the egocentric system and are unaware of wholeness, there will be lack, fear, and scarcity arising from the collective consciousness. That unawakened consciousness cannot see that we are connected to one another, to the earth and nature, and to God. Humanity has lived for centuries with a consciousness of scarcity, the limited thinking that has fomented fear, greed, sexism, racism, xenophobia, militarism, war, and injustice of every kind. It's time for this to change, and we are ready. Thank you so much. So we have about 10 minutes for your questions, which I would really appreciate. If you have them, hearing from you. You know, my book is very comprehensive about this philosophy, how you can learn to live an abundant life. So I could just barely give a taste of what's in there. So any questions you have, I really welcome. Yes, thank you.
I have a comment. You said something about being connected to nature.
Yes.
I would offer that we are nature. We're not connected.
Yes.
We just are.
Yes.
Just like we're not connected to God. We just are God.
Absolutely. Yes, but we have a prevailing consciousness that we are separate from nature, and we are connected in that. We are not separate from it. Exactly, we are that. We are nature, we are spirit, both.
Could you repeat? Somebody couldn't hear that.
His question was about, I had said about being connected to nature, and he just wanted to make the point that we are nature, that in a sense we're not connected, we are that is true of us. Just as we're spirit, we are also nature, which is exactly, there's no disagreement in yoga philosophy with that at all. Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Or yes, please. Could you stand so we could hear you?
Your conclusion that we are all growing and awakening is so very positive. And if you could just guide us to a method of staying in that positivity in the world that we actually live in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm very sincere about the power of these 4 goals. A regular meditation practice, study is helpful, read the book, that's helpful, but have these 4 goals in front of you. To live higher, with higher purpose, to prosper, to enjoy your life, and to stay geared towards this full liberation. those goals, if you will keep them in mind, will, as I told the story of Miss Margie, you know, they help me from becoming too distracted by other things. If you are really focused on that, you will find that your heart, your mind will be more absorbed in living in a higher way. Thank you for that question. And was there someone else? Another question? I thought there was another hand somewhere. Yes. Could you stand, please?
Can you speak a little bit about the power of comparison and how we fall into a habit of not staying connected to center and spread out in a way that creates an idea of separation?
Yeah, so the question, as I heard it, was about how we're like comparing ourselves to others, other situations, other Instagrams or something like that, yeah.
Or how much money?
So how much money somebody has, what it is to be wealthy. Yeah, we live in that culture today. And that's such a good question because the book is called The Jewel of Abundance. And that title actually comes from the core teaching, the core practice for cultivating prosperity from a spiritual perspective. And that comes from the Yoga Sutra. And that teaching is an aphorism that says, for one who is established in non-stealing experiences the jewel of abundance. And of course, that has to do with learning how to change our minds, right? From lack to abundance. One who is established in non-stealing experiences the jewel of abundance. So we have to unpack that, and of course, it's why I wrote a whole book. We have to unpack it, but it goes from the gross level to, you know, not taking things that don't belong to us, to not cheating, not living out of integrity, but then the more subtle part of it is just what you're pointing to, which is removing envy from our mind or comparison to someone else, because when we look at it, that's coming from a fundamental sense of lack in some way. And so that very thing that you have brought up is actually the fundamental spiritual law and practice that we find in the yoga tradition for when you get down to the nitty-gritty, how do you apply this? How do you prosper? So you come to understand that spiritual principle of mind and consciousness, and then you watch yourself doing it. You know, when I came here, I made a little joke, but I had to watch myself because we have a beautiful garden center in San Jose, meditation center. It's gorgeous. It takes up a whole city block. But parking is on the street. And so when I came in here, and I said to Jennifer and to Martha, you know, this is great, and you have a parking lot. I have to, you know, watch myself that I don't have parking lot envy. Because I could see it arising, you know, they have a parking lot, I don't, you know. And so you learn how to work that principle. That was just a fabulous question. That's what I meant. Thank you so much. That was great. Okay, are we doing with our time? We are doing very well. We're doing so. If there's one more question, maybe? If there's another question? Yes, Justine.
When you opened with the meditation and you talked about God being all surrounded by God and within, and one of the analogies that you use in your book that meant so much to me, it really clarified something for me, and I'd love for you to kind of expand on it. It was the analogy of the ocean and the waves. Like, we are waves, but yet not separate. Mm-hmm. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, thank you. And it actually ties to her question in a way, too, because I I have often thought about, we're all, in a sense, that universal divine spirit, that universal self expressing, right? Each one of us is that in expression. We're not separate. And I've thought about how, and I'm a poet at heart, so I'm always thinking in metaphor, and I was thinking about how the waves, rise up in the ocean, and there is no wave without the ocean. You know that, right? I mean, it just is the expression of the ocean, which is true for us. But I've often thought about, wondering if the waves are having a conversation like, oh, did you see that one over there? She's got all that white foam, I don't have that white foam, so. So it's a beautiful analogy that we, as spiritual beings, we arise from that oneness and we express in time and space, and we return to that oneness. So there's a beautiful scripture too from the Upanishads that says, from joy we come, in joy we live and move and have our being, and to joy we return. So I see it as that way. Did I answer what you were?
Please, yes, I did.
Was that okay? So, and the main thing about that metaphor is that when we meditate, is to remember that we're actually meditating in that. We're meditating in God. We're meditating in the ocean of divine consciousness. We're not trying to get anywhere. There's no place to get. There's no other place to go, because there is only that which we are. That sounds like a good place to conclude, doesn't it? There's only that which we are. Thank you so much for your beautiful, attentive presence this evening. It's really been my joy to be with you, and Jennifer's now going to say some things and we'll wrap it up. Thank you.
I'm going to say thank you to you.
My pleasure.
Would you join me? So glad we got to have you here.
Thank you.